This is the 8-9 Combo.
This is the 8-9 Combo. I'm Brett McKay. This is Harry Jones. And, mate, it's been a little while since we spoke last.
How's it, man? Your family must be worrying, and Tommy must be worried. Like, when's that big Harry number 8 guy?
Yeah.
The gruff man with the beard.
You haven't mentioned Harry for a couple of days. Is he all right? Are you guys all right?
Well, one of the truest things you said, among many true things, was that I have my fingers in many pies. I don't know what you meant by that, but as the audience by now knows, I've sprained my tongue in Pretoria. I've gone fly fishing in Iceland, and I've been in the swamp in DC. But I did see, came out Australian Financial Review, the AFR, a wonderfully researched, deep background article by Zoe Samios, a wonderful reporter who I've got to know. And she was able to do a much deeper expose about all the currents and underthreads of the Rocky Elsom case, a case that I'm following, obviously. And I am quoted heavily in there. And I think it's a fair shake. I think even the people who maybe don't like Rocky Elsom or don't think he did a good job, you'll see what the story is from that side. You'll see Rocky's side. You'll see the whole thing. I highly recommend it. But it's true that I have my finger in many pies. I'm illustrating a book right now, as you might know. I'm doing some very disturbing. And my problem is I draw every human ends up being a number 8 in rugby. So I'm supposed to be doing a woman. It turns into a grisly number 8.
Have you also noticed that every time you draw a human, they end up with a beard?
Yeah, and no clothes on. But so my series in the Roar, just a very brief digression, if you'll give me this indulgence. I did cover a position that's heavily featured tonight or today, wherever you may be, about number 13. And I came up with a catchy title of Baryshnikov with a Kalashnikov, which was number 13 is a very interesting hybrid position because you've got to be a dancer, you're a bit of a dude. You know, all the number 13s are very handsome, cool guys. Ringrose, Jesse Creel, Chocobatis, Brex, Hugh Jones. But also, so I wrote, as I pondered the role of the 13, the outside man, the whalebone of the umbrella defense, the wall in the rush, the fold of the sheet, it came to me, this edgy center is a full metal jacket chest playing son of a gun. He must glide in the trams with eyes in the back of his head. When he is wrong, he must escape, strike a match on attack, never drop his partners on either side, melt into space by not committing until suddenly he shoots or cuts and absolutely folds a bloke. His gambits sacrifice space for time until he can take the piece. And literally the person I gave, I won't say who it is, build a suspense, but there was a guy that annoyingly never seemed to make those mistakes against my team. Damn it.
And we'll talk to him very shortly. We've got a great rugby chat with the one and only Conrad Smith very soon.
Yeah,
but
we can
start
say his name.
It's Conrad Smith in the title, like when you clicked on it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. There's no suspense.
No spoilers, but it's right there in the title. But
the Boston never missed a tackle.
No, it's true. It's true. We start like we always do with what we used to call cheers and jeers, but I think we're just going to go with here's cheers from here on in because that's what we seem to be doing. And so it's you leading off.
Oh, okay. Leicester, Walford Road, crisp. Late spring or late winter or early spring day. Tigers were stung. They were down 2 tries early, converted. And so they fight their way back. Michael Checker going nuts in the box. They get down to the series 22. Then the 5 meter, they're picking and going around the corner. Big carries as Montoya and company come around. They get to the 2 meter line. And Myro and company decide to do that thing where they kind of soak and sit, drag the bag, hold up. They're just making you hold it up. That's all they're doing. Julian and Hanro were coming around the corner and they're bashing in there. And then suddenly there's this moment where everyone on the Saracen side says, we held it up. And everyone from the Tigers are barging you over. And Jamie's crying try. And Julian is bellowing TMO. And then the referee, the precise Pierce, he says, you pulled him over, Jamie, he says to the happy hooker. And then you pushed him over, Julian. And he literally just invents his version of the law, which is 5 meter scrum Tigers. And
5 meter scrum Tigers?
Yes. He found his way back to the old rule because he thought they were both pantomiming. This one was holding on too long, but I don't want to do a pilfer. This one's pushing, this one's barging. I can tell, Mauro Itoje, you were just pulling him over just for fun, and then Montoya go away. And he's just talking to the two hookers, Jamie, Julian, scrum 5.
Scrum 5. Fair enough. I mean, we have retro week with jerseys and things like that. So why not have retro
ruling
laws?
Like we could do this little sand pyramid for the kickoff.
Yeah, it's a good point. My double cheers for you this week is Tom Robertson, Western Force prop, Oxford University scholar, doctor of some note, now runaway tight head prop scoring tries. And I mean, I know he's been celebrated far and wide for his runaway try against Queensland on Saturday night, but there is just no way I was letting an opportunity to praise the sight of big blokes in space. And I mean, look at him blowing in this photo. And again, our podcast listeners, if you jump onto YouTube, we're looking at a still of Tom Robertson. He's got the cheeks blowing. He's really going. And the best part of that was that he was on a dry day. He was going to get stopped a couple of meters short, but it was a wet night in Brisbane. Slides in 5 meters, try for the ages.
He runs a bit like a pudding. I'll just say that.
He runs like a tight end prop.
He runs like Angela Merkel would run.
So I loved it. I'm absolutely here for that sort of stuff. And I've got another one for you later, which we'll get into. But a quick message before we do get into this week's ep. If you are watching on the YouTube channel, the 8-9 Combo YouTube channel, just hit the red subscribe button down there in the bottom corner. And if you're listening to us via Spotify, Apple Pods, any of the podcast platforms, just hit your subscribe button, your follow button, like, whatever you need to do, and make sure you don't miss anything that we do from here on in, including what we didn't do on the weekend. Let's get into this. Lots of players stay in rugby after they finish playing and coaching or admin, or obviously in the media as well. But this week's guest did nothing like that. He studied and achieved a law degree whilst playing and even worked as a solicitor while playing. But since he finished up several years ago, he's taken that legal background into the world of player advocacy and is now the head of rugby operations at International Rugby Players, the Global Players Association. It is wonderful to welcome to the 8-9 Combo former Hurricanes, former All Black great, Conrad Smith.
Good to be here. Great intro. Great. Very informative. I've learned a lot already.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Every week it's like this.
Now I mentioned prop scoring tries, Conrad, and I did a bit of a YouTube search for great prop tries after Tom Robertson's run, and that took me down a rabbit hole, of course. And I came across one from 2013, scored by Reggie Goods for the Hurricanes against the Waratahs at the Cape Tin. And it's a good little pop ball on the 22 to put him away down the left edge. And who's it thrown by? Conrad Smith.
Yeah. Remember that well. I actually thought you were going to mention Tony Woodcock, that great Bledisloe one. That would have broke your heart too. I remember throwing it past him.
The line out parted. Yeah. But Reggie Goods down the edge there. Very good to see.
Great
Props in space.
Great.
One thing I'll say
was screaming for the ball too. Mine. No.
Yeah. You had him covered. Well, one thing I'll say, Conrad, is first of all, I can't believe it's 10 years since you last played a test, but here we are 10 years on. And the other thing I've got to say is that retirement's been very good on you, mate. You're looking fit.
Yeah, well, I'm not bashing my body around, so that helps. And I can't help. Yeah, I'm fair to say I've stayed active. I've lost weight. Rugby players tend to go one of two ways. They either pack it on or and you always know, because I was the guy that was having to eat every spare second that I had just to try and put on some weight. And then so I knew it was going to go as soon as I stopped playing, and I wasn't getting force fed. So yeah, that's what's happened.
Is it a bit embarrassing though that you're one of your great partners in the midfield, Ma Nonu, is still playing? He's not that much younger than you.
That's inspirational. No, and you know what? Like I've said this before, because when we played together, we always joked that because I said, look, when I feel like I'm done, I'm walking away, and he just always said, I'm not going away until they literally pull me off the field. So he was going to play as long as he could. And yeah, man, I don't doubt he'll keep going for a while yet, I reckon.
Man, I know he's going to be the catalyst for a professional Masters League somewhere. He'll finally reach that cutover age for Masters Rugby, and
he's
he'll
the
be
George
the first
Foreman
sign.
of rugby. He's going to start selling grills.
Well, what's he up to? He's third or fourth stint at Toulon alone. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, would be. He's great, Nick. Like, you meet him and you don't doubt that he can play. So I think it's great. And to be honest, there could be more that play. Like, I think it's a mental thing that force, like, physically I could keep going when I stopped, but as I said before, like, I just wanted a different challenge, but other people are different and they just keep going, and you look after yourself. And it's happening, I think, in other sports as well. Tennis players, all sorts at different sports, but still, if you can, we're getting better at looking after ourselves and knowing how to keep the body going.
Yeah, speaking of midfielders, All Black midfielders playing in France, you did have a little stint in Po, and I was looking at your stats over your career, Conrad, and it looks like you must have kicked there a little bit, because all the other stats are round numbers, divisible by 5, but at Po you scored 29 points. So what was that?
There are a couple of sneaky conversions in there somewhere.
Drop kick?
No, that's some French accounting for you or something, because I guarantee you there was no kicking in my entire career.
You never, but
some attempted drop goals.
Yeah.
Attempted drop goals, but they never got me points.
Oh, you were never.
No.
You were 0 for lifetime on drop goal attempts. That's crazy.
Yeah, very much. I don't want to relive this, but my only attempt at a drop goal actually went out, like, as in over the sideline. So that's how far off it went.
How the fuck
driver off the tee?
Well, just skewed a little bit. It was a windy day. It sort of just got taken away.
Did you play it off? Did you play it off like a kick chase? Like, no, that was just cross kick.
Tactical. It was a tactical. Yeah. Anyway.
Fantastic. Well, mate, it's great to connect with you and look and link up, and we've been sort of swapping messages for a few weeks, but we wanted to explore this whole idea of player welfare, and it's obviously a space that you're heavily involved in, and you got heavily involved in as soon as you stopped playing. It's obviously something that's been front of your mind even while you were playing, I'm guessing. So I mean, I'm not quite sure where to start. Maybe the starting point is what and who is international rugby players, and I suppose why do we need a global players association?
I'll try and answer this quickly, but so international rugby players, we are a membership organisation, so pretty much all the player associations around the world. So most of the, particularly the high performance unions, have their own player associations. And previously, any world rugby issues, say anything around the rules of the game, the world rugby regs, or anything to do with the World Cup, they would the player associations would loosely come together and sort of talk with World Rugby. And so that sort of loose organisation it's not even as old as, the individual player associations, but about 15 years ago, that was sort of formalised. So the IRP or IRPA, as we're now known, as a collection of the player associations. And so we just focus on the World Rugby issues. As I said before, the laws, the regs, World Cup, sevens, a lot of women's rugby that's run out of World Rugby. So anything there, we're the player representative body.
Yeah, right. And so obviously a big part of that is player welfare, which then brings us into the seemingly never-ending question of player welfare and workload management, and I mean, and we don't even necessarily specifically mean concussion within that, but I guess the argument at the moment is around how many games players are playing, and there's a little series of stats come out just over the last few days, I think, Harry, wasn't it, about most starts by Premiership players Yeah, in the Telegraph,
Yep.
yeah. So most starts by premiership players in the 2024-25 season. At the top of the list, Maro Itoje's played 24 games already. These are just premiership games, Harry? Is that all games?
No, that would also include Six Nations, but he's got
The
so
test,
many coming up when you compare when you add in the Lions.
Yeah. So
exactly.
So is there a number? Like how many games is the right number, and how many games is too many for players in the mind of the International Players Association?
Yeah, and look, these are questions that have been around for a long time, and I suppose back to where it started, like player welfare, it's something that you deal with at a national level, and that's why our player associations, whether it's in New Zealand, England, Australia, South Africa, wherever you are, it's dealt with. But I think it's becoming more and more of a world rugby issue, and one we think world rugby should lead on, because players, it's not a simple landscape anymore. You look at the rugby landscape, players play all around the world, and players play in club competitions and international competitions, and in South Africa's case, they now play in the Northern Hemisphere club competition and then play in a Southern Hemisphere international competition, which means they don't have an off season. And so as this is developed, you realise, like, this is a world rugby, this is a global issue, and from our perspective, we think there should be global standards around the number of games that they play, the number of weeks that players train. And then, in terms of provide answers, like, we're the first to admit there's no magic number of games. There's no magic number in terms of weeks, but you can still have very much, we believe, limits. And again, when you talk to players and you look at it from a performance perspective as well, like the countries that do it well don't let players play near 30 games. Like that number of 30 that's brought in, in the English environment, and that was done out of a study, through Bath University, and found players that played more than 30 games had a higher risk of injury the following season. And that stands to reason, that's quite logical to most people. But even within unions that don't have those limits, and I can talk about in the New Zealand case, they knew the performance of players. When you got up in the high 20s, your performance always dropped off.
Yeah.
And you just wouldn't let players, so it's not even a welfare safety, it's actually a performance issue. And so that's what we drive. The unfortunate thing we know in professional sport is performance is sometimes sacrificed when you've got coaches that want to win every game, and you've even got players that want to win every game. You've got teams that are reaching finals, and then that gets cast out the door, and you keep playing, and that's why you get the Maro Itojes playing the games that they play, because and that's why we think World Rugby can take a lead and put pressure on the environment within unions, because this is specific to England, where they have professional clubs that aren't centrally contracted. So you have this, this tension between the club, the club that he plays for, Saracens, and the national team, England, and they both want him to play. He probably wants to play most of those games, but there is a real risk to his longevity when you're playing that many games.
And
so
there
are industries, Conrad, like the shipping industry, the law of the sea. The Philippines had, overseas workers, call centers, and they banded together and made cross-border CBAs, trying to solve for the problem that you're talking about, which is, if you're whacking a mole, because if you fix only one area, then they just go play in France. And International Trade Federation has some standards. Is there an ability, because obviously, unless you can withhold labor across all competitions, it's kind of hard to extract a concession from capital. Is there a way in rugby to do that, or are we kind of stuck in this balkanized, patchworky thing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, and our angle very much, again, from International Rugby Players' perspective, has been sort of putting pressure or calling out World Rugby to establish some standards that would apply around the world, particularly in the case of player load. the difficulty lies in that they can't really enforce that in countries, like you say. And I mean, arguably they could force it, but it has to get, to enforce it, it has to get agreed by unions. That's how World Rugby works.
Yes.
So it is a catch-22, and where we have, put our energy into is to say, all right, if we can't enforce something, we can use public pressure, and we can establish standards, and then World Rugby can still do that. They can issue, best practice standards around number of games, weeks of training, off-season, how long players should have, and the pressure that then applies on an individual league should be enough, we think, to eventually force a league or a competition or a union to adapt. Because if you've got a governing body issuing best practice standards around health and safety, you look across any industry, you'd be mad if you're operating in that industry and you don't abide by those best practice standards. So that's sort of the direction that we've decided to take. It remains to be seen how to work. But look, we know we're doing this with the players' interests at heart, and we're just going to keep doing what we can.
Obviously, you're as a players' body, you are literally representing the players. Do you get pushback from players to say, well, no, actually, maybe 30 is actually too low a number, maybe 35 is all right? Like, is there that sort of, devil's advocate almost type of conversation happening as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And it comes, you've got to have flexibility. Like even in the guidelines that we've put out, we know there'll be a situation, we say 30 games, and a player, particularly a player who might have been used off the bench for 10 of those games, and then he gets to a final. And we don't expect, if the final is his 31st game, he's not allowed to play. Like, we've never proposed something that rigid. But if it is your 31st or your 32nd, then something, that following off season, you should have 2 more weeks off, or you shouldn't be playing the preseason matches the following week. Like, there's definitely ways to work around those sort of situations. And that's generally, the feedback we get from players is that there has to be flexibility, but you work around that to find a solution. The answer isn't to then say, okay, we'll get rid of standards, get rid of best practice. It's too hard, because then then there's no restrictions, and you suddenly end up like football. Footballers are playing 70 games a year for this exact reason, because that there isn't that contact element, and so coaches and competitions, FIFA, all of them, we talk with their player association a lot, and it's out of control. It's out of control in that sport, and they'll come to a breaking point. And thankfully we're not that far down the track, but we've seen the pressures that professional sport gets placed under, and we want to make sure that we're prepared for that and have got the right safeguards in place.
A lot of the conversation around player safety, Conrad, has been about the head, and we focus on that because there's obviously collective action, class action, and there is huge liability that you can see across other sports. But when I talk to players, they express to me more of a fear of the thing they cannot see. I mean, in some cases, because you have 150 tackles in a game, you have about 100 cleans of a ruck, you have about 50 close quarter, whether it's maul, drive, scrum, lineup, and then about 15 aerial contests in a game max. But what they talk about is it's the things you don't see. It's the clean that comes, gets your leg, rips out your knee, the seatbelt tackle, or something that it's almost like they can handle the occasional tackle going wrong. And so my thought is, how do you discuss that in a comprehensive way in rugby, which has got all these different perils running around? I mean, how do you even approach it?
And that's to us, because and you're right, like, we talk about this with players, and we're all players ourselves, like we hold those same views, but that is why, like, we think it's actually a management of load. Like the game carries risk, and we can go down a path where we try and make the game safer. And, there's been so much work around lowering tackle heights. What gets penalised and red carded now is completely different than 10 years ago. But we are never going to eliminate that risk, and we don't want to, because that's rugby. And I'm not a big guy, but I love tackling and I love getting tackled. That's why I played it. If I didn't, I'd play a different sport, But so we want to a point, like, you make it as safe as possible, but you keep rugby as rugby, and then you just limit the load. You limit the amount that we have to do. Like, just because I enjoy rugby, I don't need to play 40 games a year. I don't need to train for 50 weeks of the year. I can actually, we can have a great sport that has contact, that carries an element of risk, but is beautiful to play and beautiful to watch, but all within a controlled environment and a controlled season. And we look at the NFL, and that's very much the view they've taken. Like, they've gone through that whole litigation process, but the restrictions they have brought in isn't so much around the rules. They did that to a point, but I mean, they measure every training, every amount of contact there. It is documented to the minute, and their whole, the way they have dealt with the risk management of their sport is very much just on exposure. Limit the exposure to what is absolutely, the bare necessity, and then just play the game. And that's sort of, that's more a personal view, but I know it's one, shared by a lot of, us at IRP and within player associations.
In the MLR, we've done some consulting and coaching. What surprises see is, for example, in San Diego, there's a stopwatch, and they literally train to the amount of contact, and it's, it goes off. Nope, we're done. 15 minutes of that, and it's finished. And players all say that's a welcome relief. The idea that you could recover, like, go in there, be a gladiator, play on Saturday, but then give me a little bit of time to recover. Conrad, do you hear that from players as well nowadays? Just the idea that there's either sabbaticals, obviously time off, away, but also not just such a daily grind of contact.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like, rugby is actually really good at this, and the ones that do it well, as in look after their players, get better performance. And that's all what we're talking about, the rest, the limited amount of contact and training. It is done in the best performing teams. What we need to happen, rather than that being the best case, that's the standard, because for every one of them, unfortunately, there's one or two that don't do it, that thrash their players, particularly when they lose, and don't give players rest, and don't keep a stopwatch on contact training. And, if you've lost by 20 points, your coach is telling you to do it for 15 minutes, which makes no sense whatsoever. And it's probably the reason why they lost by 20 points in the first place. But, like, again, like, this thankfully is not a regular occurrence, but it does still happen in rugby. And we just need to push that along so that, again, like I said before, it's not just the best case, it's standard across all rugby.
Is there a shared sense of knowledge about this? Are you getting peer-reviewed articles to look at?
Yeah.
And, like, how is that happening? Your understandings?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, one thing I've enjoyed. Like, I haven't done this for long, obviously. I was playing up till 2018, 19, and but the interactions we've had with other player associations, like I mentioned, FIFA Pro within football and NFL, PA, who we've done a lot of work with, like the information sharing, particularly within contact sports, because we're all facing the same issues. We've got rugby league across the ditch, and man, they're arguably more contact in their sport, which is similar, but a lot more just pure tackle, and all of that. Like, there's a lot of work going in behind the scenes dealing with the same issues, and we do share. Like, I think we can do it better and share more, but there is a lot of that going on. And I know that at an administration level, like World Rugby, similarly, they have a contact sport forum or where they all meet and discuss how they're dealing with these issues, and the aspects of load and head contact and all these things are being worked through to, hopefully get us to a better place.
Well, I was going to ask you about collaboration with national bodies, but you've touched on a few different sports there. So is it it is a similar issue. So is there benefits for everyone for multiple sports to be addressing the same sort of issues from different angles?
Yeah, absolutely. We think so, and it's interesting. Like the different sports do approach it, but in different ways for whatever reason. There'll be different pressures, different media pressure, or a different history as to how something's come about. But yeah, there are huge similarities, and as I say, I haven't been in this long, but what I have seen is where there is collaboration, there's huge benefit that comes out of it.
Do we get hurt more in the ruck or in the tackle? Because to me, the ruck is sort of sui generis. I mean, like the tackling is in all tackle sports, but a ruck is weird. Rugby's got some weird.
It is weird. It is certainly tackles still by far the most injurious event in rugby, and it's interesting. Like obviously the instrument and mouth guards, huge advancement that rugby's made. They are in use in rugby league and NFL, but not to the extent they've been mandated in rugby, which like other sports think incredible. Like the fact that you now have thousands of players around the world every weekend wearing instrument and mouth guards. This huge data set that's getting collected, and even the rate from those in the tackle as opposed to the G-force around the ruck, considerably more in the tackle, and all of that information, like as I say, like and when you collaborate with other sports and look at what other sports are doing around the instrument and mouth guards, it's all helping. None of it's there's no silver bullets here, but they are all providing a wealth of information which we can hopefully use into the future.
So on that front, it must be really helpful when someone like Danny Kerr comes out like he has in the last week or so and says he can't believe there's still players running around the premiership who aren't wearing these smart mouth guards, and that while some clubs have said you will all wear it, there are still some clubs who do make it optional. So there's obviously still work that can be done there.
Yeah, very much so, and yeah, like you say, it's great having champions of this technology that are players. Like you can, and we've said this and fed this back to World Rugby, even when they initially, so they wanted to mandate the mouth guards. We were more of the view, convince players to wear them, you'll get a better uptake. But World Rugby we're determined to mandate them immediately, and we've gone down that path. And as we've said, if you have a doctor standing in front of a room telling players to wear them, unfortunately, as much as you want players to care about their welfare, they're not always going to listen. But if you get a player standing up saying, guys, you should be wearing these, girls, you should be wearing these, like these are, it's a no-brainer. If I was in your shoes, and this is what I say, look, if I was back playing and these things were around, everything I've learned about them, and I've sat through too many sessions explaining how they work, what they do, all the potential, that they're an amazing tool. Again, they're not a silver bullet, but they are certainly helping us understand impacts, understand what a player goes through in training as opposed to in a match, what goes in the tackle as opposed to a ruck, the male athlete as opposed to the female athlete. There's a wealth of information that is coming back.
There's two sides to that welfare issue on players as well. It's why you're playing and the things you're talking about just now. What about also post-career? And that also gets into how much money I make. I looked across the different leagues, and it topped out on EPL soccer at 71% revenue. The league goes to players. NBA, NFL, and NHL, pretty much all 50%. Then you come down to cricket at 18%, UFC 16%, and tennis at 14%. What is the rugby figure? Does it vary vastly from country to country? maybe you know the New Zealand side of things, and how can we get more money in players' pockets and not so much in the boardroom blazers and the elbow patch guys?
You need to come work for us, man. So
careful what you ask for here, Conrad.
No, it's a good question, and we do, compare that sort of stuff, and you have to remember the different ways sports are set up, and even as you point out, each union, even within a sport, is slightly and has differences. Like rugby in New Zealand, without going into specifics, it's sort of a third. So a third goes to the players, a third goes to running the game, and then a third goes to the community, because rugby very much takes the attitude, you need to contribute to the grassroots, whereas American sports, you mentioned the much higher level at the players, but they're fully professional in that money doesn't go back to grassroots. And so the NFL, they do indirectly, but there's no direct money going to run, American football at colleges or even lower levels. They just have to do that themselves. Whereas rugby, for historical reasons, has always felt, the importance of helping the club player and even at the school level. So there's a lot of differences around that. But yeah, to your point, it's a constant battle around the economics of the game, and often, when, like, the reality at the moment, a lot of rugby clubs and a lot of unions are struggling financially, and the quick thing is to say, player salaries, players are getting paid too much. Whereas we'll be always quick to point out that very short-sighted. And if you look at the administration of the sport, there is no reason that you can't come up with player involvement to a revenue share where players are paid fairly, and as long as the government and the administrative side is run correctly and efficiently, there shouldn't be any financial issues. So it's always short-sighted. As soon as you hear a union or a administrative body come out and say, we need player salaries to be reduced because the game's going broke, look at the way the game's being run. 100%. You'll find the issue there. Not with player salaries. So
also, players' careers could be over in a second. They could be 3 years, 4 years. Snap something, it's gone. And they are the reason why we're putting bums in seats. So I think it's highly disproportional. Did you ever play with any guys in your career that you knew were just wonderful, incredible athletes? Could have been great players, but their career was cut short. I mean, what happens for them? I mean, there's some terrible stories out there. I think we need to work towards something that's post-career.
Yeah, and that's that's another side of what we do as a player association. That's a big partner. It's probably the reason I got into this more than anything, like wanting to help. I mean, personally, you said before, I went through a law degree, but that was purely because I wasn't any good at rugby when I was young. So I didn't get taken into an academy. I didn't get taken. If I got offered, I would have jumped at the chance. But I was left alone and was able to finish a degree, and I straight away saw the benefit of that. And I went through a rugby career, and I knew the value because I didn't have put that pressure on myself. Like if rugby failed, I'd walk off and back myself to get a job. So whereas I knew that wasn't the case for other players, and so I almost felt like, this is not fair. Like these guys are good rugby players, and they're therefore sort of getting denied their opportunity to develop that other side of their life that can, that education pathway that's sort of getting denied to them. But they're still, developing amazing skills, being in a high pressure environment. And so, like, very much the player associations throughout the world are all about taking players, making them aware of how their skills can transfer to other work. You don't just have to be a coach. You can work in business with what you've learned, and sure, you need some support, and that's what player associations are always trying to provide, a bit of support, but also give players direction so that they can, take those skills and create another life. It doesn't have to be retirement's a it's a horrible word because you think, your retirement's normally for 65-year-olds, 70-year-olds. You can't do that
when you go and buy a caravan and do laps of countries and things like that. Exactly. It actually feels like that's like you think like player welfare is a broad catch-all term, and immediately you're thinking about things like physical injury and concussion and things like that. But player welfare is just as much about life after the game, and even life during the game when clubs are in financial issues. So are you finding that player welfare for the various associations is becoming even broader than perhaps it was when you started?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like we're always quick to point that out. Like player welfare and player safety are two different issues, and yes. I think we often fall into the trap of thinking they're one and the same. Like the welfare, as you point out, is that bigger picture of how players are coping, mentally through a career, how they're dealing with the pressures that they face and the pressures of careers ending. Like that's the toughest point. And unfortunately, we've seen that in England in a professional environment where 3 teams now have folded, and what the pressure that and stress that places on players, and the important thing that the player association has to support those players. But even outside of those sort of extreme events, it's a cutthroat environment, man. Being a professional sportsman at any sport, it's not easy on stress levels, and the average career, like the stats are always thrown around, we're talking 3 or 4 years. So to deal with that as you go along, and you add that other point where you haven't gone through the traditional educational pathway. So what that then places on the men and women playing our sport, it's definitely why player associations are there to support players as they go through that and help them, deal with it as best they can.
Is that the biggest challenge for associations to make players realise that, yes, you want this to be a 10, 12, 15-year thing, but this could be over next week? Like, do you have to present it that starkly?
Yeah. And the other thing, I think, speaking more generally, like the challenge with players is for them to understand that investing in themselves and skills outside of the rugby field actually helps performance. And because the worst case is that they think it detracts from performance. And so, your typical 18-year-old will think, I don't want to do some study because that's an extra hour I could spend in the gym or on the field. Yeah, it's just, it's the 34-year-old that looks back and goes, mate, just spend that hour. Like that hour, you're going to be better off, doing the study, doing something else, and, one less hour in the gym. It doesn't, your return on investment is minimal once you're doing as much as you can. Then you've got to find your balance. Your balance is more important, your perspective, and actually, growing other areas of your life is going to put you in much better stead than that 1 or 0.5% you're going to get out of that gym session. So that's just a challenge that, all athletes face and all player associations face, I think.
What's the big lesson that you now know that you wish you knew 10 games into your Hurricanes career?
Well, to be honest, like I said before, I felt like by accident I was given those lessons, and that's sort of why I always felt like I felt like a responsibility to give back. So, but in terms of telling, as I said before, the 18-year-old now, it's what I just said, like trying to convince them that, an hour outside of this place, like outside of a training base, is gold. Like that's going to help you more than watching another hour of video. Like right now, this is what you need. Like performance, you've got to look at it holistically, not just the investment you make into your rugby, your investment in yourself. And it's not always easy to land with players, because you want to do well, and you think that's where the returns are, just in the rugby stuff. But it's still a conversation worth having.
So obviously, as a barrister, you got to talk. My kids would say lawyers are paid for money, for words, given money for words. And I was a highly vocal player, a foul-mouthed one, I would say, Conrad. I've seen you live at some matches. I was going through them and remembering which ones they were, sort of the 2013 to 15 Stormers matches, a couple against the Box. I don't remember you being that loud. Were you a talkative player, and were you chirpier on the cricket pitch or the rugby field?
Oh, good question.
Yeah.
Speaking of rabbit holes.
I didn't mind sharing my mind, if that's what you mean. I was quite talkative. I didn't get into any of the sledging type banter on the field. I did, I enjoyed, like you talk about South Africans, Jean de Villiers, Jacques Ferry. I had great, we were fierce competitors, but I actually enjoyed having a chat with guys like that. And we knew, the pressures of the game hardly needed to be escalated by me trying to serve a guy about, something or taking the piss out of him. So
plus they're both monsters, let's be honest.
Yeah, and I'm always the smallest, so there was no way. It was technical.
I wouldn't sledge Jacques Ferry.
No, exactly. So it was more the referee that I like to help the referee see where he might have made the wrong decision or how he could have, made a different decision. I was guilty of that a little bit.
A little Socratic method with the referee.
Yeah.
So
I like to think I was clever and point out the error of his ways.
That's the legacy you left for TJ Perinara, was it?
I'd like to think I spent a lot of time with TJ, and I know some of our conversations, it was more around, I never, wanted him to stop speaking because I knew it's the role when he's a halfback, but to be more subtle and to be, think of how you're going to influence the referee. You might not win that decision, but you could win the next one. So that's
true.
I think I had a few conversations with TJ about that.
The irony here is that you've got into refereeing in New Plymouth.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, and that was not so much from playing, more the role I've had recently. As I said, that's, falls within our remit, what we do at IRP. So we have a lot to do with referees and the lawmaking bodies at World Rugby. We're sort of always bringing the player perspectives, and through that you sort of get a keen interest in the laws of the game and get encouraged by some of the current referees, like, oh, you should have a go. And one thing led to another.
I was going to ask that. Was that an encouragement because you clearly knew what you were talking about, or at some point did you go, how hard can this be?
A bit of both. Yeah, a bit of both. And then also, like just with I got a boy whose son was playing, and then he went and played football, and I still wanted to be involved in rugby, and I didn't want to coach because I didn't have probably the time to. So I just thought, I'll as you say, how hard can it be? I'll pick up a whistle and see how this goes. So
what part of it has
good.
What part of it has proved to be the hardest for you that almost surprised you about being a referee?
Yeah, I think the importance of being in position, and like often, like you're spoiled with the view you get from television now, and so and obviously that's a big part, getting your positional players a referee. So I was in horrific, I'm used to running out at centre, so I was hanging wide, and I was missing things at rucks, and I even asked the players a couple of times. I was like, what happened there? I'd seen the ball fall down, and I was just like, honestly, poor boys, who's not that on? And it's amazing how often they were like, yeah, sorry, it's me.
So what do you try to do? Just kind of follow the nine, be on the blind side of the nine, or kind of?
I've since learned that you have the jockeying position where you can sort of sit back, or the good ones can get in the line if they know which way the ball's going, and they sort of sit in the defensive line but are able to back away and not obviously obstruct or impede the defence. So that was half the battle at the start, just working out where to stand, but I still don't think I've got it figured out.
Your number 13 instinct's going to kick in as a referee, and you're going to intercept the ball one of these times. I can feel it.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Do you enjoy it? Do you enjoy still being out in the middle?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's you get through that, and it's cool. You contribute to a game a bit more. Like I've got a lot of friends that coach, but I still think refereeing's largely underrated in terms of you can finish a game, and if it's been a really good game, you feel like you've contributed. And I'm, as I've been saying, I don't mind talking, so I end up coaching a little bit. Like especially I do under 15 schoolboy rugby, then I can sort of tell a boy if he answers back, I'll sort of stop the play and tell him what he's done wrong, and then I feel like I've given him some advice that probably he'd listen to more than as a coach. Yeah,
that's cool.
It looks exhausting to me to be a coach, up to a referee.
Oh yeah, yeah. They cover some great. I found an article, and I can't think who wrote it about you getting into refereeing last year, and I actually laughed. The very last line was just the quote, and you said, "I need to make it clear, I have no ambitions to take this further."
No, I'm gonna see the World Cup. I can feel it.
Yeah, because everyone straight away, like even the guys here, they're like pushing me to take club, keep going higher levels, and I have to tell them, no, I'm just happy where I am.
Yeah.
So Conrad, this question is either from Charlie Felix Morgan from the Telegraph if it's terrible, or it's from me if it's good. But what aspect or metric were you focused on that maybe wasn't so focused on by the media or the rugby at large, statistics and stuff necessarily, but which one did you kind of go, that's when I had a good game, that's what I want to do this season, that type of thing?
Good question. I've just had an immediate answer. Because I'd always go, obviously you analyse a game through the analysis that you have, and I generally just looked at actions. So using the database that we normally had, they'd spit out obviously all your actions, your ball carries, your tackles, your rucks, whatever.
Every
and
involvement.
actually just the raw, and the raw number was something that I used to, like, because then I'm involved, and even because I was someone that, I didn't make a lot of mistakes, but when I would, what I would do in a game that I, wasn't involved, then I could be quite quiet. That was sort of where I saw myself. So as long as I was involved, then I'd back myself to make the right decision and take the right option. So I just had to keep getting my hands on the ball and getting into good positions to, make tackles. And when I did that, then I'd, feel I'd have a good game. So it was as simple as, first thing that would come up, and it was either 130 actions or 60. And
that's very interesting to me, because that's usually a blindside flank kind of statistic. But you were looking for work at 13. Brilliant.
Well, and just because that was as the player that I was, and that's different for Ma'a inside me, it would be different. But for me, it was just the importance of then, if I'm involved, I'd back myself to have a good game, because I'd as I say, it was sort of things that I pride myself on. When I got involved, I'd take good options. So that was more the challenge for me.
For Ma and Nono, it was how many people did I destroy their soul by running over them en route to the line break.
The follow-up then is there another stat that popped up on your sheet where you absolutely let everyone know about? Was it a
one drop goal for Poe?
Was it a high offload number or something? Was it?
I like how, and especially like it changed obviously when you play a while. These things change, but a lot of more off the ball stats were included. Like in the early days, it was pure ball carry, pure tackle, whereas it was a lot more like chasing of kicks and support play and being there and that. And I and generally I'd work pretty hard, so it was normally the GPS numbers that I was quick to point out, and I know by the end of my days, because it used to only be like we'd have a key stats and it would be line breaks, and it was always leading those. But then when the GPS numbers started getting published, I was quick to say, "Come on, these ones are."
I always like this
theories down.
I was like this funky stat, which was loose ball collected. And I also liked it when it was
yeah.
head-to-head.
Oh, yeah.
Any play like a Quagga Smith that's like always going to win the loose ball collected. He's just a badger. I love that.
Yeah, that's good. That's
Too good.
But this has been a fantastic chat. We could very easily sit here for another hour talking about all sorts of different things. I'm quite sure, but we've got plenty out of this. It's been really enjoyable first and foremost. So thanks for giving up some time for us. We really appreciate it.
Not a problem. Very equally for myself. I'm like I say, normally giving a recap on the whole career, but it's actually I love chatting about this stuff, as you can probably tell, and it's sort of it is my life now, and it's something I've really enjoyed, particularly over the last sort of 18 months. And it's frustrating at times. It's not as rewarding as a rugby game where you get to play and know a result. You have to slave away for years on end and still with no end in sight. But hey, it's good to try and feel like I'm still helping out players and helping out the game.
Awesome that you come by, Conrad. And you're not that far away from 100 caps, so I think if the French are going to send their scrubs and third stringers, you just call Razor up, get the 100, man.
There you go. There you go.
I'd love it.
This is the 8-9 Combo with Brett McKay and Harry Jones, and mate, that was absolutely fantastic. Conrad Smith on the 8-9 Combo talking about so many really important things in the game, but still sharing a very clear love for everything that he's doing.
Yeah, I always liked watching Conrad play. He killed me, he on his teams would kill my teams. But he
didn't often pump me up either, for the record.
He had that knack of knowing where to be. And I think the players have got a good man there that he knows where to be. And I think he'll make on the basis of this pod, he'll be a very good advocate.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And very clearly a smart guy. And I love that he's fallen back into refereeing. I just think that's brilliant. I think that's brilliant.
I think he offered me a job, so I'm working with Conrad Smith.
He might have done that. Yes, he might have done that. We'll be back with the weekend postmortem, looking at all the big games from the big results each weekend. It's out late Sunday, early Monday, depending on where you are in the rugby world and when we record, or indeed if we record, which we will be back doing this week. We had to miss out last weekend, but that's okay. Games of the week, mate, and we rip straight into Champions Cup round of 16 this weekend. It's always exciting, I think, when the European competitions start getting to the pointier end of their seasons, and there's a couple of really interesting games, I think, in there. There's like how, if there's all this talk about Saracens already throwing up the white flag in their game against Toulon, how much could they get thumped by? I think Leinster Harlequins could be interesting. I think the idea of Italians playing in the quarterfinals of Champions Cup interests me. So Cast Benetton is of interest. Do La Rochelle care anymore, or have they just given up on 2025 completely? I think you particularly like Glasgow Leicester, though.
Yeah, so initially you go, round of 16, so there's going to be all these, there's no weak teams. But then not all the matchups are really heated up until the quarterfinals, I think.
Yeah.
But in this particular vintage, I kind of was attracted to Glasgow versus Tigers. They're very different kind of teams. They're both sailing pretty well. Glasgow's coming in clearly the second best team in the Earth, kind of clearly now. And Leicester Tigers, even with that loss to the Saracens, they're clearly in that top four, and on their day, they're difficult to beat. And now we're just in knockout land. Forget the bonus points, forget whatever you want. Just knockouts. And Andre Pollard, Julien Montoya, Andre Lieberberg, Freddie Stewart, Perez. There's some really tough nuts there who know how to win a knockout game. I also think that you get these really interesting parallels. I looked across, Opta does a really great job of a club hub, and it does every single European-based, so the South African teams too. The top clubs are at the top on gain line and on 22 entries. So you'll see Toulouse, Bath, Leinster, Bordeaux. If it's 22 entries, four or permitted, that plus minus, and then gain line dominance. It's almost like exact, right? The worst clubs at the bottom, and every other statistic is pick your poison. It's style based. So Glasgow is really good at making tackles. Bath is the worst and yet Bath is top of the Prem, right?
Yeah.
So Tigers, Glasgow, to me, is a real style makes a fight kind of,
Yeah.
Glasgow's got a lot of, hot attack. It's got some sexy backline players. Tigers is trying to do this kind of Michael Check is just saying, we're going to slam it down your throat, kind of Waratah's Super Rugby winning championship,
Checkerball. Yeah.
He always talks about close quarters. Now we're going to win the close quarters. And so I'm looking forward to that one. And then, I think there's plenty to look at. Munster up against their former hero.
Yeah.
Could be good.
Yeah. And you mentioned before, now that we're into the knockout stage, it's the what if question that drives it. If there's a potential mismatch, the what if question still brings it in, because what if Saracens does upset Toulon? What if Ulster beats Bordeaux? Yeah, what if Ulster beats Bordeaux? So
and you can see Ronan O'Gara having kind of a shit season, and then on this one day he beats his former club Munster, and it will make his season.
This is why I sort of keep asking the question: do they care? Like if La Rochelle go on and win another Champions Cup, it won't matter what else they do this year.
So rugby mad.
It won't matter.
I think I DM'd you something from La Rochelle, how they're just mad all the time about rugby. Even if they're not winning,
they're losing,
they don't care. They sell out. And I
saw a stat, a graphic that was done. It was Hugh Roberts actually popped it out, and it was days since last win in the top 14. It was Bordeaux won on the weekend, and Toulon won on the weekend. So their number is like 1 or 2 and all that, all the way down to La Rochelle, 84 days since they last won. So that's brutal. That's like what first week of January that is. So yeah, that's pretty funny. But yeah, look, it's just going to be interesting. As I say, knockout phase always is. So we'll certainly keep an eye on that, and we'll be going through that in the weekend post-mortem. It is round 8 of Super Rugby Pacific, despite what I've got written here in front of me. And there's a couple of Moana Pacifica Waratahs in Albany is a big game for both teams. Blues Hurricanes on Saturday night in Auckland, I think, is a interesting game for both teams as well. But I think we both agree that the Chiefs Reds on Friday night in Hamilton, that's the clear standout there. Yeah. That's second versus first. I mean, the Chiefs have been first all year. They've only just dropped to second this year with this weekend with the bye. So I wrote a column the other week saying, are we close to seeing the real Queensland? I think we will see the real Queensland this weekend. It's a real benchmarking game. Yeah. It has a bit of a test match quality to it. Yeah. Both of those teams sit in the Harry Index, just as a side note. And it's cross-ditch stuff. It sets up beautifully. I think most rugby fans who are not even involved in Super Rugby, South Africans, Irish, they're going to watch this game. Yeah, no doubt. It'll be a ripper. It's week 16 in Japan. There's 6 rounds to play up there in League One, and there's 2 there that I'm interested in. Shizuoka Blue Revs v Mitsubishi Dynaboars. The Dynaboars can go 6th with a bonus point win, so that's important for them. Kobelco Kobe Steelers v Toshiba Brev Lupus on Sunday. Kobe can pop into the 4 with a win there as well. So I think that's a fairly important game there. Dave Rennie he's just sort of been. They're sort of slowly working away. Kobe, they're a decent team, but they're starting to get a few results. So I'll be interested to see how that plays out. And then Major League Rugby, it's round 8. I think there is one very clear standout there as well, mate, which I'm sure you agree. San Diego Legion v Chicago Hounds on Saturday. That is first in West v first in East. That is a conference one-on-one showdown. I kind of think Chicago is the surprise team this year so far. It feels like it, yeah. I thought they might have peaked and then valleyed, but no, they seem to have a really, they're hard on the ruck. They try to play through teams. It's good stuff. I like that. That's a good clash of styles as well, because San Diego is just running wild right now. Yeah, a wide running team with a heavy heavy Australian influence, but a heavy Sevens influence with John Kennedy in charge there as well. So this then brings us to the Harry Index, which I like that you've narrowed down to 10 now. It was starting to blow out. It was getting up into the 15, 16 territory, and then you had another couple bracketed, and now you're back to 10, and it sort of feels like we're reaching the knockout stage of the Harry Index as well.
Yeah, so when the Super Rugby teams kind of just smash in, it's out of coordination with the rest of the leagues a little bit. It has to swell a little bit, and then sometimes it's difficult to split some teams. But now we're at the more mature halfway point. It's a little bit easier. And so as you can see, the Reds are still there in the top 10 and, looking very impressive, I must say. Gloucester is just outside of it, looking like they're, trending right, whereas Crusaders are just out of it, also looking like they're maybe, weren't as good as they might have seen at first.
Yeah.
Intriguingly, you have Bulls versus Bayonne, who will face in the Challenge Cup. So there they are, looking at 8 and 9. And then the top group is pretty much the same, except Glasgow made a pretty big move, and Toulon slipped a little bit. The other movement comes from Bath. Johan van Graan is really putting a good team on the field almost every week. They're getting more and more consistent, and Finn Russell is being a real field general on the club level.
I watched their game on the weekend, and they were just in control. Is what they were. That was their game against Quins. They just dominated the territory game. Asked all the right questions. Harlequins didn't play badly, I thought, but the result says that they were well.
It's a strong team.
So,
and if there were a Harry Index for social media, though, I would still have the Blues.
The Blues are on top.
On April 1st, with a lot of lame April 1st, may I just say, terrible April 1st jokes. The Blues basically saying their entire season up till now has been an April Fool.
Now we start winning. That was quite good. It's actually a close run second to after round one, turning the table upside down, going, oh yeah, look at us. that was quite good. That then, mate, unless you have anything else to add, it's been a bumper episode.
I rest my case, Your Honor.
Yeah.
The defense rests.
That then is another great episode of the 8-9 Combo done and behind us. Our socials are in our usual places. We thank, of course, Conrad Smith for joining us. That was just such a great chat, and we'll get him back on it at some point. I think there's still plenty more to talk about in this space, so our thanks to him. Harry and I remain in the socials in our usual places at Harry Bordy Jones and at BMC Sport, and don't forget to be sure to find and follow the 8-9 Combo on Twitter, on Blue Sky, and on YouTube as well, and leave a rating or review whenever you can. Share us as far and wide as you can, and just keep subscribing, keep following. We haven't even touched on this. We smashed through 3,000 YouTube subscribers on Saturday morning. As we record now, we're through 3,500. So we've added something like 1,200 in the last 2 weeks alone. It's just been absolutely mad. So if you're new to us, welcome. If you've been with us from the outside, from the outset, thank you. It's just been fantastic, and we will keep on going. There's no question about that. This is the 8-9 Combo, the short side set piece combination you didn't realize you needed in a rugby podcast. Sean Maloney's all loaded in the closer again. I'm Brett McKay, he's Harry Jones, and we'll be back in your ears with the weekend post-mortem.
Come play with us.
Here goes Jones with another bruising run. He links up with McKay, who pops back to Jones. They can't, they won't, they will. What a try. The Dream Team Combo go in again.